Welcome to this complete guide for TOEFL writing question number 2. This is the writing for an academic discussion question. So on July 26, 2023, the TOEFL IBT will change, or if you're watching this after, it has changed. And basically what's going to happen is that the independent writing question will be retired. And instead, you'll have a writing for an academic discussion question. And that's what we're going to talk about together. People have a lot of questions about this question. It'll look something like this on test day. This is from ETS's official site. And here are a couple things that you need to know really quickly. You have 10 minutes to write it's called a post. We can call it a post or an essay. So your post or essay here, and I'll talk more about this. The timer will start counting down and you'll see the timer count down here. Once the timer starts, you will see the online discussion. It'll look like this with a teacher posing a question and students talking about the question. I'll give you more strategy about this in a minute. First, the professor will pose a question. So as you can see down here, the question is, what do you think is the most significant effect that watching television has on people? Why do you think television has this effect? After that, one student will provide their opinion. And that's this girl Kelly up here. So she'll provide her opinion, and then the other student will provide their opinion. They'll either agree or they'll add to the student's opinion already here. And then you have to write at least 120 words adding to the discussion. That's a big word, adding, and I'll talk about that more a little later. And so you're going to write in that little box on the bottom right of the screen, and the directions say 100 words, I'm going to say 120, and I'll explain more very soon. But that's a broad overview of the question, but I'm sure you probably have more questions and you want to know about the possible topics that will be discussed. How can you manage your time? How the writing post is scored by ETS? How to structure your response, a word-for-word template. I'm going to give you that as well, and also a library of useful words and phrases, and of course a bunch of tips and tricks and strategies so you know exactly what to do for this writing question on test day in July. Or after, whenever you're watching this, you'll be ready on test day. But before I do that, really quickly, got to give a shout out to TST Prep. We have all your TOEFL needs, and we are going to be updating everything in July for the new TOEFL, and that includes the TOEFL emergency course. This is perfect for anybody who is preparing for the test in less than a month. You can finish it in 2 days, really, but about 2 weeks is probably the best, but you can stretch it out to a month. I think it's a great way to practice. It has everything you need. Check it out, the TOEFL emergency course, and tstprep.com. All right, so let's get into this new question type, the writing for an academic discussion. So these are the questions that are currently available from ETS, and they take place in a sociology class, a political science class, or an economics class. I'll read them really quickly. Sociology, what do you think is the most significant effect that watching television has on people? Political science, if you were a policymaker, which issue would you argue is more important, education or environmental protections? What scientific discovery or technological invention from the last 200 years would you choose as being important? As you can see here, these are pretty general questions about everyday life. So it should be something that, even though it's kind of academic, like about inventions, it's pretty much something that you experience in your everyday life. You experience some invention that's changing your life, right? So a couple other examples could be from psychology. What are some strategies that people can use to manage stress? Okay, and then there's a couple more examples here. The point is that you should be able to answer this question because it's going to be something that is a topic that you will have encountered in life in some way. So either through psychology or sociology or politics, something that you have experienced before. Because that's a question people have. What if I don't know anything about the topic? You should know something about it. They're not going to ask you explain the physics of, water. I don't know, whatever. So they're not going to ask you something like super specific like that. It'll be something that you have some experience or encounter with in your life in some way. But also you can look at the discussion and see what people wrote. You can get ideas for your writing based on the discussion. That's one of the reasons why it's there, to help you generate ideas. So that's the topics that you could see. Let me move on to time management. You only have 10 minutes to write, so it's pretty simple. First 2 minutes, you scan the discussion and plan. And then about 7-8 minutes, you're actually writing. And then the last minute or two, you should be editing your essay. Now, the reason why I say scan the discussion is because it's actually going to be pretty hard to read all this and then write. You're going to feel like you don't have enough time. So you just want to kind of scan the passage to get a general idea of what's being discussed. Understand the question, of course. The question is the most important thing you focus on, and then you write. I put this example here from ETS. There'll be a link in the description below to all these sources. But this is a sample from ETS on the left, where it starts, in the past 200 years, tons of scientific discoveries. Okay, so this sample answer scored a perfect score. ETS provided this and explained why it was a perfect score. And the thing I want to point out is that in this essay or post, whatever you want to call it, there was nothing from the two students. It didn't mention anything that they said. It just answered the question and added to the discussion. That's why you can scan the discussion, because it's not necessary for you to include information from it. You can if you want, but be careful with that, and I'll talk more about that later. But it's an optional thing. You don't have to include information. This is not an integrated writing. So question 1 in the TOEFL writing is integrated, where you have to read and listen and then write about what you heard and what you listened to. This one is not the same thing. This is not you writing down what you see and what you read. This instead is about you adding to the discussion. So you're not going to say much at all what the students say, of what the students say. All right. About the scoring criteria. So this is from ETS. Again, links in the description. And I'll just kind of summarize what this is here. You can take a screenshot of this if you want. But basically, you add to the discussion. This is going to be a theme. I'm going to say this over and over again because it's so important. Vary your grammar, vary your grammar, vary your vocabulary. So that means to not just say, I like bikes, bikes are nice, they are fun, I enjoy them. You know, that's the same grammar tense and the same word, bikes, bikes, bikes. You have to change the words. You have to show sentences with more than one clause using contractions like and or but or why, or you can make sentences with more than one clause like while or so. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but that's the idea. You have to vary your grammar and vocabulary, give reasons, examples, and details. Don't have too many typos, spelling mistakes, or grammar errors. And it's at least 120 words. I added that. That's not from ETS. That's something I added. You should have at least 120 words. Probably about 150 is your goal. Your response is a contribution to the other two students' post in an online discussion for the class. Be sure to add your own perspective to the discussion. So this is from ETS. This is from their criteria. This is the most important thing. They want you to add information. You don't have to say anything that the student said or that the teacher said. You have to answer the question and add to it, okay? So that's important because some people, when they give me samples of this so far, they take pieces from the students that posted, and they take pieces from it. Not a good strategy. And I'll talk about a better strategy in a minute. So again, I just want to emphasize this is optional. The students, what they say and what they write in their posts, you can say something about it, you can mention it, but you don't want to say the same thing that they said. You don't want to repeat it like the integrated essay. I can't say that enough. You just want to add information and you want to add to the discussion. So let's go through an example question together, and I'll give you some tips and tricks along the way. All right, let's do that. I don't know why I made a slide like this. Okay, so here's the sample here. This is something that we made at TST Prep based on the examples from ETS. You can take a screenshot of this and you can practice it if you want before you hear me speak. I think that's a great strategy for you to actually try to write something. Try to write 120 words about this in 10 minutes. You can pause this and do that right now if you want. But I'm going to break this down a little bit and show you how I would go about answering these questions and how to tackle this writing task. Okay, so check the class. So the directions will always be the same on the top left. You really don't have to do anything with the directions. You basically just kind of memorize what they say. Remember, okay, I have to express my opinion and make a contribution. It's going to say the same thing all the time. You can pretty much ignore it. Only thing I would read is just the class. It'll say which class it is, and this is political science right now. Don't read too carefully. You can scan the kind of introduction. It's always like, today we've been today we're going to talk about, or the last week we talked about, or we've been discussing this, and so let's talk about it more. That's pretty much the same BS all the time. And then it goes to a question that says, what do you think, is globalization a positive or negative force in the world today? So that's the question that you need to be asking yourself. Now, one thing that I'm not going to talk about today, but you could do, is outline. You don't really have a lot of time, so that's why I didn't talk about it here, because I don't think it's a good strategy, because I don't think you'll have enough time. But that is something you could do, is that you can, write down a couple notes of what you're going to say first before you do it. But I think time will be an issue if you try to outline. And the student will disagree or add to the previous student's point. Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about this is that a lot of people expect these academic discussions to be like the integrated writing, question 1. That's very structured. That has a reading passage, and the listening will kind of disagree with the reading, right? And it's almost always like that. Whereas these two students, they might agree, they might disagree. In this case, Alex disagrees with Brian, but that's not always the case. It's not really that important, to be honest, as long as you use the information to help you add to your own essay and add to the discussion. You can pause this and read it if you want. I'm not going to do that right now. So you don't want to take too long with this, because you need to write 150 words. That's going to take some time. I'm going to make another video with some sample questions that you can practice this, so you can play with the time, see how much time you need to read and to write and to edit. But this is my general recommendation. How are you going to write this? What's the template? First thing, general statement about the topic of the conversation. Okay. Second thing, state your opinion on the issue. Third thing, acknowledge the point of view of one of the speakers in the conversation. Explain why you agree or disagree. Summarize the point made in your post. Okay. So I'm going a little fast on purpose. I'm going to explain each of these steps in a lot more detail. So again, the question for this example is, what do you think, is globalization a positive or negative force? So that's the question I need to answer. So I could have a pretty good template sentence here. The topic of blank has generated much discussion in recent years. This is probably going to work with a lot of the questions that you'll see, because it seems like most of them have to do with general social issues today. It might be a political science class, but it's going to have to do something with like air pollution, right? Even though it's political science. And so we all have some experience with air pollution, right? Or know something about it. So it'll be something that's a kind of debatable topic that generates discussion, because this is supposed to be like, if you've ever taken a college class online, this is supposed to be like an online class where you kind of interact online through a discussion. After you have a general statement, you state your opinion, okay? My personal belief is that, okay? And then you say what your personal belief is. When nations interact together, it leads to less suffering. So globalization is a positive thing, right? This general statement in the beginning, you could cut it. It's okay. Because it's not really adding anything to the topic. Remember, that's very important that you're adding to the topic. So I'm going to say that this is optional, this first one. I'm going to actually make a little star here. Hold on one second. Magic. I added a little star at the first one, general statement about the topic, because I thought about it, and it's not really something that adds to the discussion. So it's more like this kind of habit that I have already of teaching essays. This isn't really an essay, it's a post on an online discussion. So it's not the same style as an essay, whereas you have this kind of general introduction and then you go into more details. So we can actually make that optional. If you put it, it's fine, but it's not necessary. After that, you state your opinion on the issue. My personal belief is that when nations interact together, it leads to less suffering. So my personal belief is, and then you say whatever you want to say. One thing to keep in mind is that I'm going to show you some other words and phrases to use besides my personal belief and besides this general introduction. I'm going to show you some other examples later. So I want you to kind of make a template that you like, but have this structure. Next one, you acknowledge the point of view of one of the speakers. So you don't want to get into too much detail about what somebody said up above in the in the discussion. You don't want to get too deep in there, but you can just acknowledge and say, I understand Alex's concern over cultural homogenization, but I believe she misses another critical point. And then you talk about the critical point you think she missed. And then I explain why with a reason and an example, okay? So that's that. And remember, you do not have to include any information from the previous post. So yeah, I'm just going to reiterate this over and over again. Your job is to add to the discussion. You do not have to say anything that they put in the post above you. And the last thing to do is to summarize the main point of your post. And that's what I wrote there. International trade and travel are not possible in a world without globalization, which is why I believe it's crucial. Okay, and I explain why. So that's it for the most part. And half of it is actually, not even required, to have an introduction and conclusion, because you want to add to the topic. And this is not an essay. This is an academic discussion. So that's why I wanted to include an introduction and conclusion, just to show you that you can have this, you can write it, and it's something that you're probably used to doing before. But think of the context. This is a discussion online that you're writing a response to. So you don't need this general introduction and general conclusion. We can include it to try to add to the word count, and if you have trouble finding ideas. But it'd be much better to just repeat the second and third step again to the other speaker. Say, I understand what Alex said, and this is why I agree, and I understand what Paul, whatever his name, said, and this is why. But I disagree because, and you could explain why you disagree. So you can do that twice if you want to have more content to add on. But yeah, so that's the general overview of how it should look. Couple really important things. The first thing is that this is the whole thing kind of spelled out for you here. You can take a screenshot. On the left column, it says what you do at each moment in the beginning, first, second, third, fourth, and then the template in the middle, and then there's the example that we just talked about to the right. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that if you would like. Next is the template part in the middle. We talked about the one disagree. I understand Alex's concern over globalization, but okay. If you agree, you could say, I totally agree with Alex's point about globalization, and I would like to add, and then you can add something. So that's a big kind of template sentence, but most of it is your own words. I do want to give you a list of very useful words and phrases to use. Before I do that, I wanted to say one more thing about the way that this is graded. This is from ETS. Or you might even find that your opinion about government priorities depends on certain factors. That education should be a priority in some circumstances, environmental protections in others. This is perfectly acceptable as long as you explain and support your reasoning. What am I talking about here? In other words, you don't have to completely agree or completely disagree. You could say, on the one hand, I think it's a good thing, but on the other hand, I think it's a bad thing. That's totally fine. There's a lot of different ways to answer this question. The most important thing is that you explain with reasons and examples. You don't just copy what was said in the post from other students, you add to the discussion. That's the big thing. Answer the question, add to the discussion, give details, give examples, give reasons. All right, and hopefully you understand that by now. This is a big list of transition words and phrases. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for your introductions, opinions, examples, adding informations, and conclusions, again, take a screenshot of this. It'll be really, really, really helpful. All right, take a screenshot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, So what do you think? Is this easier or more difficult than the previous independent writing task? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're ready to practice with this question, I'm going to put a link to TOEFL Writing Question 2 practice for the Writing for Academic Discussion. It's a long title. And don't forget to check out tstprep.com. We have courses, classes, teachers, and everything you need for TOEFL. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.